What happens when the man who owns 15 warehouses puts on a name tag and sweeps his own floor? That question hit Preston Callahan hard one Wednesday morning as he sat at his desk, flipping through incident reports. Most were routine equipment maintenance, minor delays, but the tone of a few reports from Warehouse 6 in Dayton, Ohio felt off. It wasn't what was said, it was what wasn't. A loader quitting mid-shift without explanation. An anonymous complaint about manager favoritism. Another about unsafe conditions. Preston had inherited the logistics company from his father 4 years ago. It had grown fast, 15 warehouses, 200 full-time staff. But lately, he'd been feeling the cracks. Too many layers between him and the floor, too many polished reports that never quite matched the numbers. He leaned back in his chair. "I'm going in," he said aloud. He called in his assistant and laid it out. "Warehouse 6, send me in as a temp." New ID, fake resume, the whole thing. "You sure? You've never even been to that one in person?" "Exactly." 2 days later, he walked into the Dayton warehouse under the name Paul Carter, wearing steel-toed boots, a high-vis vest, and a Reds cap pulled low. He'd grown out his beard, dyed it darker, and wore thick glasses. No one would recognize him. He'd never met any of these workers in person. The warehouse was big, loud, and fast. Forklifts zoomed past, pallets stacked high. He was paired with a floor loader named Lewis, a lean guy in his 20s with a tired face but easy smile. "New guy, huh?" Lewis said, offering a fist bump. "You pull your weight, we'll get along." Preston nodded. "I'm here to work." By lunch, his back ached. He wasn't used to this kind of labor anymore. But it wasn't just the physical part that bothered him, it was the tension. The floor crew barely spoke to the shift manager, Rick. He barked orders, never said please or thank you, and disappeared into his office for huge chunks of the day. And then there was the floor itself. "Hey, how long's that spill been there?" Preston asked Lewis, pointing at a slick patch near the loading dock. Lewis shrugged. "Couple hours maybe. Someone said something, but they never clean it unless a manager says to." Rick blew it off. Preston frowned. "That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." Lewis gave a dry laugh. "Yeah, well, we don't exactly get gold stars for speaking up around here." That stuck with Preston. Later that afternoon, the warehouse picked up. A rush order was coming through and everyone was hustling. Preston was stacking boxes when he heard the crash. A thud, a sharp cry. He turned just in time to see a young loader, maybe 19, go down hard near the spill. "Hey, somebody help." Preston dropped the box and ran over. The kid Tyrese, his name tag read, was holding his leg, grimacing. "Don't move, all right? Stay down," Preston said, crouching beside him. He looked around. "Where's a manager?" Rick finally walked over, slow and annoyed. "What happened now?" Preston stood sharp. "He slipped on that spill, the one you ignored." Rick didn't flinch. "He should have watched his step." Preston's jaw tightened. "He's hurt. Call someone, get him medical." Rick rolled his eyes and pulled out his walkie. "Dispatch, we got a kid down, probably twisted something." Preston stayed with Tyrese until the medic arrived. The kid was taken out on a stretcher. Lewis walked over, shaking his head. "That spill's been there all day." Rick didn't care. Preston had seen enough. He was supposed to stay undercover a few more days, but he couldn't. Not after this. He walked straight into Rick's office. Rick looked up, annoyed. "You're not supposed to be in here." Preston closed the door behind him. "Yeah, let's talk about that." Rick frowned. "Who the hell do you think?" Preston took off his hat, his glasses, and looked him dead in the eye. "My name's Preston Callahan. I own this company." Rick paled. "You let a safety hazard sit there for hours. You ignored your crew. You just watched a kid get injured because you couldn't be bothered to act." Rick opened his mouth, but Preston held up a hand. "Save it. You're done here." Effective now. Preston walked out of the office, still shaking with adrenaline. Lewis looked up from the floor, confused. "Where's Rick?" "Gone," Preston said. "And things are about to change." Preston stepped out of Rick's office, the door clicking shut behind him. The warehouse had gone quiet. Workers who had witnessed the incident were whispering, glancing at Preston with cautious eyes. Some had stopped completely, unsure of what to do now that their manager had just been fired in front of them. He pulled aside the assistant shift lead, a woman in her early 30s with a short buzz cut and a clipboard tucked under one arm. Her name tag read Chandra. You're the most senior person here now, he asked. She gave a curt nod. I guess I am. Didn't expect it to happen like this, though. Neither did I. What's your staffing situation like right now? We're down 2 loaders and a forklift operator. One called off sick this morning, the others just stopped showing up last month. She hesitated. No one's replaced them. Preston took a breath and nodded toward the break room. Walk with me. They stepped inside. A few workers were sitting at the tables, eating quietly. One of them, an older man with a knee brace and a posture that told stories of 30 years in manual labor, caught Preston's eye and gave a wary nod. Preston returned it. He lowered his voice. I need to understand what's really happening here. Be blunt with me. Chandra leaned against the counter. All right. You've got people quitting mid-shift because they're pushed too hard, too fast. No backup when someone calls out. Machines break down and repairs get delayed because we're told not to waste budget. Who told you that? Rick did. Said the repair requests just pile up at corporate anyway. No point. Preston's jaw tightened. That's not how it's supposed to work. No offense, but we stopped expecting corporate to care. We had a guy fall off a loading ramp last month, broke his wrist. Rick told him to clock out and go to urgent care on his own dime. Didn't even file an incident report. Preston felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. What happened to him? Quit the next day. Said he'd rather flip burgers than die in a warehouse. He looked down at the floor, then back at her. How many of the crew are full-time? Maybe half. The rest are temps cycling through weekly. They barely get trained. Most of them don't last past Friday. Why didn't you say something? Chandra raised an eyebrow. To who? Rick. He'd tell us to stop whining. HR, we don't even have a rep assigned here anymore. Closest one's in Columbus. Tried calling once. Never heard back. Preston sat down at the nearest table, resting his elbows on the surface. We're going to fix this, but I can't do it alone. You willing to step up, at least for now? Chandra crossed her arms. Depends. You just firing people, or are you actually planning to change something? I'm staying here until I do. She studied him a moment longer, then gave a short nod. All right. Then I'm in. Before Preston could respond, the break room door opened and Lewis walked in, rubbing his shoulder. His shirt was sweat-stained, and he looked like he hadn't had a proper break in hours. What now? He asked when he saw Preston. Preston stood. I need to talk to everyone. Can you help me round up the crew? Lewis blinked. You're calling a meeting right now. Right now. Within 15 minutes, the warehouse floor had been cleared as much as possible. The crew gathered near the receiving dock, tired and skeptical. Some leaned against pallets. A few stood with arms crossed, clearly waiting to be disappointed. Preston stepped up onto a low platform used for loading and looked out at them. I owe you the truth, he began. My name is Preston Callahan. I own this company. I came here undercover because I was hearing too many things that didn't match the reports I kept getting at headquarters. A few people exchanged confused glances. One of the younger workers near the back whispered something to the person beside him, who shook their head. I saw a kid get hurt today. I saw a hazard ignored. I saw a crew doing their best while being treated like they didn't matter. That ends now. He paused, letting it settle. Rick's gone. Effective immediately. Chandra's going to be your acting floor lead for the time being. I'll be here working alongside you until we stabilize this operation. A thin man near the front, maybe in his 50s, raised a hand. You expect us to believe this place is gonna change just because you showed up for a day. I don't expect you to believe anything yet, Preston said. But I'm not leaving until I earn it. The man scoffed but didn't argue further. Preston turned to Chandra. Let's prioritize safety and staffing first. Start by logging that injury properly. Get maintenance here tomorrow morning. I want every open repair tagged and scheduled. Chandra nodded and began scribbling in her notepad. Preston continued. Second, I want a full list of temp workers currently on site. We're converting the good ones to full-time. No more churn. If someone's pulling weight, they deserve stability. That drew a few murmurs from the group. A woman with braids and a name tag that read Nia stepped forward. You really gonna make temps full-timers, or is that just talk? I'm not in the habit of making promises I don't keep. You'll see. She gave a slow nod and stepped back into the crowd. The meeting ended and slowly people returned to work. Preston didn't go back to a desk. He grabbed a pallet jack and started moving frames alongside Lewis. "You serious about all that?" Lewis asked. "Every word." Lewis glanced at him. "Then you better pace yourself. We've been patching holes for months." They worked until the shift ended. Preston helped clean up, stacked empty bins, and took inventory with Chandra. By the time the last forklift shut down for the night, he could barely feel his arms. Back in the office, now empty of Rick's things, Preston sat at the desk and opened his laptop. He typed out a memo to HR, demanding an investigation into the Dayton site's handling of injuries and staffing. Then he called his operations director. "We're doing full safety audits on all locations," he said. "Start with warehouses 5 through 8. I'll explain later." After hanging up, he leaned back and rubbed his temples. The warehouse was dark now, most of the lights off. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty. Chandra stepped in, holding a folder. "Found the injury reports, or what's left of them. Half of these were never submitted to corporate. Some are missing signatures." Preston opened the folder and flipped through the pages, his jaw clenched. "Thanks for staying late. I figured you'd want to see how deep the rot goes." He scanned a few more pages. "I knew things had slipped, but this is failure. My failure." Chandra leaned against the doorframe. "You're here now, that's something." He looked up at her. "It's not enough." "But it's a start." She nodded once, then turned to leave. Preston stayed behind, staring at the incomplete paperwork, the missing dates, the forged initials. He thought about Tyrese, the kid who fell. He thought about the loader who broke his wrist and never got a call back. And he thought about every warehouse he hadn't set foot in. Tomorrow, he'd be back on the floor. But tonight, he sat in silence, finally seeing his company for what it had become and what it needed to be. The next morning, Preston arrived at Warehouse 6 just after 5:30. The parking lot was still dim and the air was heavy with dew. He wore the same temp gear as before: vest, boots, and a name tag that still read Paul. The only difference was that now, everyone knew exactly who he was. Inside, the early crew was already clocking in. A few nodded to him. Most kept their distance. Preston didn't blame them. Trust didn't rebuild itself overnight. Chandra approached with a clipboard under one arm and a binder in the other. Her expression was focused but unreadable. "They're still cautious," she said without preamble. "Can't blame them. They'll come around," Preston said. "Let's just keep moving." They walked the floor together, stopping at each station. Preston asked questions as they went about equipment, schedules, what wasn't working. Chandra didn't sugarcoat anything, neither did the workers. At the loading dock, a woman named Alexis was attempting to shift a half-wrapped pallet by herself. The shrink wrap had torn, and the boxes on top wobbled with each movement. "Where's your partner?" Chandra asked. Alexis didn't look up. Called out. "Again? You're not supposed to handle that weight solo," Preston said. "I don't have a choice," she replied. "If I leave it, it backs up the whole row." "Then we find another way. Stop, we'll get help." He waved over a nearby picker. "Give her a hand now." The picker nodded and stepped in. Preston turned to Chandra. "We need floaters, at least 2 per shift. People who can jump in when someone's out or something stalls. Otherwise, we're just burning them out." "I know, but we can barely fill regular shifts as it is." "Then we pull from temp to perm faster. Talk to HR today." "I want names by the end of the week, people you trust to lock in." Chandra gave a single nod. "There are 3 I'd vouch for already. Start with them." They made their way toward the packaging area where 2 workers were arguing over label discrepancies. Preston didn't interrupt. He watched. One was a young man with headphones half tucked into his collar, the other a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a steady voice. "They've been sorting this out themselves," Chandra said quietly. "He's new. She's been coaching him without being asked." Preston stepped closer. "Everything all right?" he asked. The woman looked up. "We've got mislabeled units coming down the line, wrong delivery codes. I told him how to flag it upstream." The younger man looked sheepish. "I thought I was supposed to keep the line moving. Didn't realize I could stop it." "You can when it's wrong," Preston said. "That's exactly when you stop it." He turned to the woman. "What's your name?" "Monica." "You've been mentoring him," she shrugged. "I've done this for 16 years. Either you help or you watch people drown. I want you to lead a training session next week, paid, on the clock. Show the new hires what matters." She eyed him, skeptical. You're serious, completely, she nodded once. All right. Then I'll do it right. As they moved toward the back office, a voice called out from behind them. Hey, you got a second? Preston turned. A tall man with broad shoulders and a bandaged hand was approaching from the returns section. He wore a faded hoodie under his vest and had a slow, deliberate walk. You're the boss, right? He asked. Yeah, Preston. I'm Eric, I work returns. I've been trying to get a new cutter blade for a week now. Mine slipped, cut deep. He held up the bandaged hand. Rick told me to just tape it up and keep going. Preston's expression hardened. Why didn't you go to urgent care? Tried. They said I needed a supervisor report for coverage. Rick never filed it. You still have the blade. Yeah. Left it near my station. Show me. They crossed the warehouse floor together. Eric led the way to a small corner space cluttered with open boxes and damaged goods. He reached under a torn flap and pulled out a box cutter with a bent locking mechanism. This thing doesn't hold, Eric said. Slips shut while you're cutting. Preston took it carefully and turned it over in his hand. The locking tab was clearly worn down. The blade slid with a faint click, refusing to stay put. No one should have been using this, Preston said. We're throwing it out. And we're doing a full tool check today. Every station, every shift, he looked at Eric. You're going back to urgent care after this shift. We'll call ahead and cover everything. You'll have the report in your hand before you leave. Eric exhaled slowly. Appreciate that. Chandra approached as Eric walked off. I heard, I'll start the check now, good, and have warehouse supply ship us 24 replacements, top grade only. Chandra scribbled it down. You want me to pull all cutters until they arrive? Yes, if it slows things down, so be it. No more shortcuts. Later that afternoon, Preston stepped into the break room. It was quiet, just the buzz of the fridge and two workers eating in silence. He poured himself a coffee from the old, sputtering machine and sat alone. A young woman with thick curls and a blue hoodie nodded in his direction. You're really sticking around, she said, still a lot to fix. She pushed a folder across the table. I was going to give this to Chandra, but maybe you should see it. He opened it. Inside were printed screenshots, text messages between Rick and another supervisor from a different warehouse. The messages were dated just 2 weeks earlier. They included phrases like, keep the temps scared, they'll work harder, and if someone threatens to report, just cut their hours and they'll quit. Preston looked up. Where did you get these? I used to date someone over at Warehouse 3. She screenshotted everything when she left. Said it was only a matter of time before it blew up. I figured it should go to someone who gives a damn. He closed the folder. Thank you, what's your name? Keisha, you're full-time, still temp, been here 4 months. No one ever called me back about conversion. They will now. She gave a quiet nod and went back to her lunch. Preston left the break room and made a call from the back stairwell. His voice was low but direct. I need you to pull all internal messages involving Rick and any other floor supervisors. Last 6 months. If there's a pattern like what I just saw, I want names, and I want them out. He ended the call and stared out the narrow window. Rain had started to fall, light and steady. The loading dock would be slick again by evening. He went back to the floor and found Lewis stacking crates near the outbound gates. You doing all right? Preston asked. Lewis wiped his forehead with his sleeve. Better today. Still short on people, but at least it feels like someone's watching now. You're not invisible to me. Lewis hesitated, then pointed to the front office. There's a guy who's been lingering around deliveries. Says he's with equipment rental, but he's been asking odd questions. What kind of questions? Wanted to know if we log all our forklift hours. Said someone told him we were running hot and skipping maintenance. Preston's brow furrowed. Did he show ID? No, just a name, Martin. Said he worked with your procurement team. I don't have a Martin on that team. Lewis raised an eyebrow. Then who is he? I'll find out. Preston walked toward the front gate, mind racing. If someone was poking around under false credentials, it meant 2 things. Someone knew he was here and someone had something to hide. As he reached the front, the man was already gone. The guard shrugged, said he left 10 minutes ago in a white van. Preston stared at the exit. The rot went deeper than he thought, and he wasn't leaving until every inch of it was gone. By the 3rd day, Preston's presence on the floor no longer drew stares. People still kept their conversations cautious around him, but the temperature had shifted. There was less tension in the air, not relief. Not yet, but something closer to quiet expectation. The kind that came when people weren't quite sure if they were about to be let down or finally see things turn. Preston stood in the corner of the break room mid-morning, nursing a paper cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm. Across from him, Chandra was on the phone, flipping through a clipboard as she paced along the wall. When she hung up, she walked straight to him. "Warehouse 3 just confirmed it," she said. "There's no employee named Martin on their books, never has been." Preston nodded. "I figured. Whoever he wasn't just snooping, he was gauging how much we'd uncover." "He knew something was coming to light," she said. "You think it's internal? I'd bet my name on it." Before she could respond, a knock came at the breakroom door. One of the floor workers, a stocky man with a shaved head and nervous eyes, stepped in. "Bossa, Preston," he corrected himself. "There's a guy waiting out front, says he's from HQ. Brought paperwork for someone named you." Preston set the cup down. "Get Chandra a copy of whatever they hand you. I'll talk to him myself." Outside, a man in a navy windbreaker stood beside an unmarked van. He had a clipboard tucked under one arm and a subtle twitch in his left cheek. Preston approached, nodding to the security guard who stood just a little too far to be useful. "Who sent you?" Preston asked. The man didn't answer right away. He looked up slowly, then extended the clipboard. "I was told to deliver these equipment assessment reports. They're backdated, but you'll want to see them." "Why are they backdated?" "Because they were never filed until someone realized you were on site." Preston took the clipboard and scanned the top sheet. It was stamped with a date from nearly 2 months ago and marked resolved. The issue. A faulty loading dock sensor, the same one Preston had watched Alexis work around earlier that week. "Who signed off on this?" he asked. "Someone named Drew, your regional facilities manager." Preston's jaw tensed. "Get back in the van, don't talk to anyone else." "I'll be calling you." He turned and walked straight back into the warehouse, passing Chandra on the way with the clipboard still in hand. "This is bigger than just Rick," he said. "Someone at the regional level's been burying risk." Chandra's eyebrows lifted. "We're talking cover-ups. Looks that way." She tapped a pen against her palm. "Then you're going to have to do a lot more than hand out overtime and new box cutters." "I know. That's why I need you to call a meeting, full crew, noon." "Don't tell them why." The meeting was held in the wide center aisle between the outbound lanes and the packaging section. Forklifts were parked and silent, pallets tucked neatly to the side. Every shift worker was there, including a few temps who looked unsure whether they were even allowed to be. Preston stood on a low wooden skid, speaking without notes. "I came here because I didn't trust what I was hearing from my own people. What I've found is worse than I imagined. What happened to Tyrese was preventable. What happened to Eric was inexcusable. And what's been happening behind the scenes, reports being buried, injuries ignored, people treated like they're disposable, that ends today." A few heads nodded. One person clapped but stopped when no one joined in. "I'm not just talking about this warehouse. I'm talking about the system that allowed it. We've already terminated Rick. Effective this morning, we've also suspended our regional facilities manager pending a full audit. Anyone else found to have falsified reports, ignored safety flags, or retaliated against employees will be removed." A woman in the back raised her hand. "Are you actually following through, or is this just for show?" Preston looked directly at her. "You'll know it's real when you see the changes. And if you don't, tell Chandra. Tell me, I'm not going anywhere." Chandra stepped up beside him. "Starting today," she said, "all incident reports go directly to Preston and HR simultaneously. No more rubber-stamped signatures. We're also adding a red flag system. Any repeat issue on a shift auto-triggers a visit from a safety officer within 48 hours. Preston turned back to the crowd. "We're not leaving it to chance anymore, and if you've been overlooked, ignored, or mistreated, come forward. Your job won't be threatened. In fact, if you've stuck it out through this mess, you're exactly the kind of person we want to keep." After the meeting, people lingered longer than usual. Nobody rushed back to their stations. Instead, they talked in clusters, some skeptical, some cautiously hopeful. Preston returned to the office and called HR. "We need permanent offers drafted for 8 workers here. Chandra has the names. I want the contracts delivered by end of week. He hung up and turned to Chandra. Do you know anyone we trust to replace Rick long-term? Chandra didn't hesitate. Monica, she's already mentoring new hires. She's respected. She's calm under pressure. Preston nodded. Have her meet me at the end of second shift. We'll talk. That evening, as the sun dipped below the far wall of the warehouse, Preston sat across from Monica in the now cleared shipping office. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her. She didn't look nervous, just tired in a way that came from carrying other people's weight for too long. You've been holding this place together, he said. We need someone who knows the job and doesn't forget the people doing it. She tilted her head. I'm not a manager, I'm a worker. You can be both, Preston replied. You've already proven it. She didn't answer right away. Then she reached into her vest and pulled out a folded piece of paper, her original application for a supervisor role 5 years ago. It had never been processed. I gave up on this a long time ago, she said, but if you're really cleaning house, we are, then I'll take the job, but I'm doing it my way. Exactly why I'm offering it. The next morning, Monica was announced as the new floor manager. No ceremony, no speech. Just a new nameplate on the office door and a quiet congratulations from those who'd worked beside her for years. In the following weeks, the changes held. Injuries dropped. The red flag system caught 2 equipment faults before they became hazards. Eric returned with a doctor's clearance and full back pay. Tyrese, once recovered, was offered a permanent position with modified duties. He accepted. Preston didn't leave right away. He spent the month rotating shifts, showing up at odd hours, asking quiet questions, not to spy but to understand. And every time someone called him boss with a hint of sarcasm, he answered them directly. Every time someone pointed out a problem, he took it seriously. Before he left Dayton, he called the crew together one last time. This time, there were no speeches, no declarations. He simply said, "Thank you for showing me the truth. I won't forget it." Then he walked off the floor, not to disappear, but to do the harder work, rebuilding the rest of his company with the same clarity he'd found here, among the people who had every reason not to trust him and gave him the chance anyway.